Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to Millionaire Mafia. Got a little screen time today, driving home from the office. And I figured I'd talk a little bit about something that has been a big influencer on my mindset and the way I run my business and the way I run my life and the standard that I hold myself to. And it actually it is from me really screwing up pretty bad. And the lesson I want to talk about, and it's a sore spot for a lot of people, but it's humility, right? Being humble and being humbled in order to learn humility. And that's what this story is about. So anybody who knows me, or I kind of talk about, and I will talk about more about what I did for the last 15 years, which has been a Marine Corps attack helicopter pilot. So I flew AH-1 Whiskey helicopters for the Marine Corps for quite a few years. In the HMLA, or the Marine Light Attack Helicopter Squadrons, that was what we call it. It's a very cutthroat, type A personality that is, and business that we live in, right? I mean, our job is literally to hunt and kill bad guys, right? Our enemies all across the globe in some of the worst conditions imaginable, and employ that ordnance and kill those bad guys in very, very close proximity to other friendly forces. So if we screw up, if we're off by just a fraction of an inch, that can literally be the difference between the enemy dying and our friends, our fellow Marines, soldiers, sailors, and foreign nationals living, coming home to their families, or them dying by either the hands of our enemy, or even worse, by our own hand in what we call fratricide, or blue on blue. And so because of that, we have a very, very, very extremely low tolerance for error or for mistakes. Now, we're still human, and we understand that, and we know that nobody is perfect, and there's no such thing as even a perfect flight or a perfect engagement. Even if you do very well, it's not perfect. There's something you could have done to be better. Now, we know that. However, we still hold each other and ourselves to the highest of standards. And because of that, sometimes we can cross over from being cocky, and we can cross over to being arrogant. And that is something you definitely don't want to do, because what happens is, while arrogance may sound like just being overconfident and a little bit too cocky, arrogance can actually lead to making very critical errors, because you are over-reliant on your ability to affect the objective area and the mission, and you think that you actually are more responsible than somebody else. So a little bit about me. I was a newer guy in my squadron. My first squadron, we deployed to Afghanistan. I had done a deployment. My first couple months in the squadron were overseas, hooking and jabbing, doing God's work for Corps and country, right? And so because of that, I became very skilled at my job, at what I was doing, for my experience level. Now, there was definitely people that were much better than me and more experienced overall, but for the short amount of time I had, I was very experienced and very well trained by my mentors and my instructors and things like that. So fast forward a few months, we were back from my first deployment. I was going through our, as a helicopter pilot, your goal is to become a helicopter aircraft commander. So basically, you're responsible for taking that aircraft and the ordnance on it and employing it effectively against the enemy, both in actual combat and in training missions that simulate combat very well, and actually sometimes are harder, I would argue, than actual combat. And then after that, you go into your section lead, which is very similar to being a aircraft commander in the leadership role. That now at first I was leading an aircraft, so myself and the crew. Now, as a section leader, I'm leading 2 aircraft. So I'm not only leading my aircraft, but I'm taking the other aircraft out there. I'm in charge of, $60+ million worth of aircraft and men and equipment, as well as all the ordnance employed. And my job is to effectively and safely employ that ordnance in close proximity to the friendlies and ensure that they get back home safely. The mission gets completed, right? So I was complete with that. I was getting ready to go on to my second deployment with that same squadron when, unfortunately, another sister squadron that was getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan had a Class A mishap, and that's where either you lose an aircraft or you lose personnel, people, the pilots, or both. And unfortunately, we lost two aircraft. Two aircraft ran into each other, and several Marines were killed, including one of the most well-known and respected and experienced helicopter or Cobra pilots in the Marine Corps. Bulba Draco was a great pilot. I never got to meet him, but I knew him through his work and through his reputation as a Marine, and he literally rewrote our training doctrine for the HMLA. So me, a one-pump guy with a decent amount of hours, was supposed to go and replace that guy. Now, I wasn't filling the same role. He was the executive officer, the number 2 guy in the squadron, but I was essentially filling his seat in the new squadron. I was getting ready to go out the door. That I knew maybe a couple people in the squadron as, you know, peers when I went to flight school, and I happened to know them, but I didn't know them well. And so I'm supposed to go in there, and there was one other guy that went there as well. And the guy that I knew best out of all those people was the guy that was coming from another squadron, so he was new to that squadron too. And in my squadron, we were known as kind of the Afghanistan and Iraq, the deployment squadron, right? So the Vipers, we had deployed quite a bit as a squadron. I say we as a collective we, and we had done a very good job over there. And so we had a reputation for doing very well, and we had a reputation for doing well because we had a very high expectation of ourselves and our, you know, superiors and our peers and our junior pilots. So because of that, it was very much like a frat, right? It was very gruff, very coarse. We treated each other with that kind of, well, go fuck yourself mentality, right? And because of that, that cavalier mentality, that could very easily, if you don't check yourself, and you don't check your pride, that can turn into arrogance very quickly. And unfortunately, in my case, it turned into arrogance and pride. And so I deployed. I went over to Afghanistan, and I started flying and fighting with those guys. And everything was going fine. I flew with my own peer group and guys that were comparably qualified and skilled, and we did very well. We were shooting every day. We were doing missions. We were being successful. We were employing ordnance against the enemy, slaying bodies, and doing it really close to other friendlies, and we were doing it effectively. So you can see how somebody who's already kind of got a little bit of pride, a little bit of cockiness, and bordering arrogance, that has just now been doing really well for himself and with his peers, can get a little bit more of a big head. So one thing that we do in the HMLA, and all squadrons do this, the Harriers do it, the 53 guys do it, the Ospreys do it, is we'll have the most junior guys that will actually give briefs on tactics, procedures, and ordnance and employment techniques to the squadron. And so these most junior guys are getting up in front of the most senior guys in the squadron with all the experience, and they're briefing, and the expectation is that they brief to the level that they are the masters at this, which they've never, some of them haven't even used the ordnance that they're talking about, or used any of the tactics or techniques that they're talking about. So you can imagine how well that sometimes goes. It takes a lot of preparation. It's very nerve-wracking because you're in front of 30, 40, 50 guys, and it's all you. You get very little direction. You say, hey, here's this piece of ordnance, here's this tactic, here's this technique, go brief on it. And that's it. Well, we've all done it, and it's good because it teaches you to learn your craft, and you overlearn it, and then at the end of the day, you become better because of it. You become better at speaking in front of other people, and you learn how to take a punch in the face, because we're not, at the end of the day, you don't get you know, a high five and a clap and a, you know, Hercules, right? You get crushed. These senior instructors, who are the tactics subject matter experts, have been taking notes for your entire hour-long brief that you've probably practiced for countless hours and, you know, worked on and prepped and put slides together and time and effort and a lot of energy, and they literally tear you apart. At least that's how it was in my first squadron. Now, I think the more senior guys had a much more tactful and professional way of doing it. But when you kind of get that monkey see, monkey do, you think, okay, if I'm an experienced guy and there's a junior guy here, I got to crush him because that's what I'm supposed to do. And unfortunately, that, which was not what the intent of this was at all, of this exercise was, it was to teach people how to be better at their skill set and to teach them to be better at getting up in front of people and taking criticism, constructive criticism, and using it to make themselves better. Why would I have taken that out of that? I don't know, but I didn't, right? And so I thought that I was supposed to sit there as a senior guy, listen to the brief, and then crush the junior guy. Mix that with my cockiness and my arrogance and my pride, having done very well for myself up to this point and been successful and seen success. I am sitting in a brief with another junior guy who's giving a brief on a weapon system that we have called the TOW, tube launched, optically tracked, wire guided missile. My favorite piece of ordnance to shoot. It's a missile that is tracked, and it's actually got 2 wires on the end of it, and they're connected to your aircraft, and you actually have like a little joystick, and it's like playing Atari or Nintendo or whatever, or some old school 80s game, and you get to track, you get to watch the missile in your sensor, and you get to track it all the way to the target. It's probably one of the coolest things you get to do as far as weapons employment, and it's, you know, so there's a lot to it, and this guy actually did a really good job. He briefed it professionally, he had good presence, he had good projection, his slides were in the right order, his timing was good, his cadence was good. Overall, he did pretty good. Now, there's always something to prove. There were some things he said that he misspoke, or he said incorrectly, or wasn't 100% accurate on. But one of the things, the thing that I decided to key off on, was something to do with the max effective range of the missile. But he gets done with this brief, and he asks for questions, because that's what he would say. Okay, that concludes my brief. Do I have any questions? That's how it goes. And so I, you know, let the other guys talk. Some more senior guys asked some questions. Some were just legitimately curious. They didn't understand, or they didn't know, and they're asking for clarification. And he did a good job with that. Now it's my turn, and I get up, and I don't say it like a question, as in a, hey, can you explain this? I didn't understand, or that didn't make sense to me. It was a, well, you screwed this up. Why did you do that? And then stare at him with a smug look on my face, right? Because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. And looking back, I can't believe I ever did this. I don't know what came over me. I don't know why I did this. I don't know if you've ever had that where you do something, you act a certain way, and you're like, why would I do that? Why did you're so retarded. You're an idiot. Why did you do that? If you have anything like that, I'd like to hear kind of your situation. Yeah, you might not have to go into specifics on names and specific events, but go ahead and comment on something, an instance where you did a really boneheaded thing, and you know, you really regretted doing it afterwards. So I'd be curious to know, and not in order to, you know, pass blame or make myself feel better, but to show everybody else here that's in the group, that's on the page and the channel, that, you know, that it's not just them that are screwing up, right? And I hope, you know, hope I'm not the only one that screwed up. But anyway, so moving back up to fast forward to where we're at, and I asked the question, and one of the most senior guys in the squadron very bluntly said, "Can you cite your source?" to me, right? Because I had made an argument to the contrary to what this guy had said. And I kind of brushed him off, kind of like a smart ass, right? Because I already didn't like this guy. He was actually not a well-liked guy in the squadron, but that doesn't really mean that he was wrong in this instance, that he was 100% right. And then I kind of re-asked my question again with the smug look on my face. Well, and then this WTI, weapons tactics instructor, so literally the weapons and tactics subject matter expert, the guy that literally teaches tactics and weapons employment to the squadron, is the standardization, proceeded to essentially chew me out in front of everybody for me having made a stupid mistake and asked a really terrible question in a terrible way, and actually been wrong. I might have mentioned that I was wrong. My understanding of the range of this missile and why it was actually wrong, and the technique for employment that had to do with the max effective range was wrong. So that made it even worse. Not only did I act like a dick, I was wrong in the first place. So what do you think that did to me? Well, I can tell you, it immediately caused me to lose credibility in the face of the junior guys who I was getting ready to be an instructor of. It caused me to lose credibility with my seniors who were all sitting there and saw me act like a jackass to a junior pilot who they were going to be teaching me how to instruct. So you can imagine how that went over. And then it also made me look like a jackass and kind of discredit my peer group, because I represent their class, their peer group, because they will be the new instructors for those same guys. So it's very easy to look at my screw up as what is going to be expected of my peers, of what these junior guys should expect to get from the guys that are soon to be instructing them, and what the senior guys expect the guys that are junior to them to then teach their new pilots. So that looks really bad, right? And so I did that because of my pride and arrogance. Now, the good news is that while I made a really boneheaded move, I realized that I made a mistake, and I apologized, and I made up for it, I hope, but it took me a long time. And I ended up becoming an instructor and teaching a lot of these guys how to fly and how to employ their ordnance and how to employ their tactics with their squadron or with their sections, you know, in close proximity to the friendly forces and all that stuff, right? And I did fine. I had a good relationship with a lot of the junior guys. But I guarantee you, in some way, shape, or form, that particular guy was forever tarnished between me and him, right? There's no way I could ever make up for that. And there's certain guys that were senior to me that were forever tarnished in the way they looked at me and the way they thought of me as a pilot, as a Marine officer, and as a person. Your reputation is everything you got. It's better to shut up, listen, and know your surroundings, know the situation you're in. I came from a very different squadron that I was in before the mishap that happened to the other squadron and to the new squadron. I came from a very different squadron. I came into this new environment, and I tried to go gung-ho into it and just repeat what I knew, and that was 100% the wrong way. So you can kind of relate this to the real world, you know, where you may be changing jobs, you may be changing your market, you know, things like that. New family members might be coming into the fold. Things are going to change. People are going to change, and you can't treat it the same way that you've been treating it as before, because it's just different. And you need to, when things change, you need to listen and look, and then listen and look again before you talk, because you got 2 ears, you got 1 mouth, you got 2 eyes, you got 1 mouth. Do at least 2 of the other before you do the latter, right? So anyway, I hope you learned something off of that. You know, take me being a jackass as a way to protect yourself from doing something similarly stupid. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. I'm going to be starting the next part 2 of how I went from $3 in my bank account in the bottom of my personal and financial position to having over $3 million and 300 units in a pretty short time as a side gig. So I really look forward to having you with me on that one. I appreciate you here. If you like this, if you want to see more of it, go ahead and subscribe. I'd really like to see that you guys following this, commenting, and interacting on the channel in the comment section. That'd be really awesome. Thanks for your time. Take care, guys. Here's to your wealth.